back to our youth series on Ruth. Today we're going to be talking about chapter 4. Quick recap of chapter 3. Remember, Naomi helps Ruth come up with a plan. She's going to sneak in the middle of the night and lay at Boaz's feet, and essentially she proposes to him. Boaz loves this, he's excited about this, but there's another kinsman redeemer that he has to make sure that things are done the right way. He goes off to find this redeemer to see if he will take on Ruth and her family, or if Boaz will have the right to do so. So Ruth is left waiting for an answer about where her destiny will lie. Before we jump into this chapter, I want to leave a question for you and your group to start. And this is the question. Do you ever feel like you haven't gotten a fair shake in life? Some of us have just had some really bad things happen in life. Some of us, our luck just doesn't seem to go our way, and we feel like we're stuck, or we're unwanted, or we're unloved, or we just can't seem to get where we want to go. When we look at the story of Ruth, remember back in Ruth chapter 1, we saw Naomi lose her husband, lose her sons. She's headed back home, and she says that God's turned his back on me, he's abandoned me, and she's feeling down, no hope, and all is lost in her situation. Ruth is sitting here at this moment, her and Boaz, waiting for an answer, and she must have thought, what if this other kinsman redeemer wants to take me on, but he's a bad guy? What if he's not who I would want to spend my life with? I want to be with Boaz. I want us to start, and we're going to jump right in, read the first 6 verses, so read along with me. It says, "Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, 'Turn aside, friend, sit down here.' And he turned aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elder of the city and said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down. Then he said to the closest relative, 'Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you.' And he said, 'I will redeem it.' Then Boaz said, 'On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased of his inheritance.' The closest relative said, 'I cannot redeem it for myself, because I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it.'" So Boaz knows there's a way to do things properly, that he should check with this other relative that had first right. And when the relative first hears about the property, he's excited and he thinks, yeah, I'll buy the property. It's good to have some more things. But he quickly learns that there's also a woman that needs saving, that needs protection, needs all these things. And in order for him to get the field, he needs to marry her as well to carry on the inheritance. But he quickly realizes that would put his own inheritance at risk. And he wasn't willing to do that. Instead, he says to Boaz, "You go on ahead and do so." Sometimes it's really easy to do good when there's nothing at stake, when there's nothing that we're going to lose. But it's very difficult sometimes to do good or to take care of somebody else when it comes at a cost to ourselves. I want to ask you this question for you to talk about with your group. How do you decide if helping someone is unwise? And do you find it hard to help people when it comes at a cost to you? Doing good sometimes comes at a cost. And if it didn't cost anything, probably everybody would do good a lot more of the time. Sometimes helping other people requires us to give of ourselves. Let's jump back in the story, starting at verse 7 to verse 12. This is what it says. "Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption of the exchange of land to confirm any manner. A man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So the closest relative said to Boaz, 'Buy it for yourself.' And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are my witnesses today that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belongs to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife in order to raise up the name of the deceased on the inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers and from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today." All the people who were in the court and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built their house of Israel. And may you achieve wealth in Ephrath and become famous in Bethlehem. Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz essentially is able to buy the property off of the family and to take Ruth as his wife. And they trade sandals in this ritual that signifies that they bought it. Now, a lot of people will point out that it seems as though Ruth is being treated like property. And when the Bible says that he acquired her, it's not that he bought her. She would have been had some right to be able to refuse and to kind of not just get stuck there. But instead, when he says that he buys the right to take on the family, but he also chooses to marry Ruth. And we know this because of the way the rest of the story goes. It seems as though he very much respects her as an equal and wants a life with her. Many times in life, we see that we want something, and it's easy to find a way around some of the barriers. Boaz wanted Ruth to be his wife, but he did what was right, and he was patient. He went and found the appropriate people and did things the right way. Usually when we take the easy or sometimes the secretive way to get what we want, we might get it, but it often comes at a cost to our situation. Sometimes it comes at a cost of consequences. And even if we don't see those costs right away, it comes at a cost to our integrity. God puts trust in those who are trustworthy. And if we show that we're not worthy of trust, don't be surprised when you feel like God never asked me to do anything, or God never allows me to do something great for his name, or to make a difference for other people, because you've proven untrustworthy. It's something that often we have to earn. Not only did they get married as a result of Boaz buying the family rights, so to say, to the property and the inheritance, they decide to have children and have a family. Okay, I want you to stop and ask your group these simple questions. Have you ever done something wrong to get what you wanted? How did it make you feel? And why is it so hard to do the right things? Now, the end of chapter 4 is a great way to end the whole book. It teaches us a lot about how God sees people and what he wants to do in our lives. Let's continue reading right to the end, starting at verse 13. It says, "Both took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, 'Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer and a life sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.' Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.' So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these were the generations of Perez. To Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, and to Ram Aminadab, and to Aminadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse David." We talked about at the beginning of this video about how sometimes we didn't get a fair shake in life. Some of you are born into families or situations where you just feel like, why is it like this? Why didn't I get what other people get? Some of you feel forgotten and overlooked. Ruth probably felt like this for a long time. She lost her husband, her father-in-law, her brother-in-law, And her and her mother-in-law, they were left with almost nothing. She had to sit in the situation of waiting and eventually learning to trust in God, and she went out to find a way to provide, but God provided. She moved to a new land where she was a foreigner, and she knew that from the outside looking in, she wasn't even from the nation that God had chosen. Sometimes you probably feel like you don't measure up, you're not good enough, or that you have such bad circumstances that how could God possibly use you, and that he couldn't possibly favor you. But that's the beautiful thing about this book and about this story. The story of Ruth teaches us so much differently than our own feelings will sometimes dictate. The moment that Ruth chooses to serve God and to be with Naomi, God has a plan to redeem and to restore them and to give her life and to give her many blessings in that life. Not only does she get the family that she wants, not only does she able to keep all the things her husband owned, not only does she get a husband and a life that she wants, here we see that she becomes the great, so many greats, grandmother of David, which we know eventually David is the great grandfather of Jesus. She is an ancestor of the Savior of the world. She becomes one of the very reasons why Jesus is able to come in the family that he comes. If we decide to follow God, to be people of good character and hard work, God can make our story incredibly important. I want you to ask this question with your group. Do you ever feel like God can't use you because of who you are, your circumstances? Why don't you take a moment and point out to your group and to each other things about them that make them a great tool in God's hand. I want us to take a moment and look back at the whole story of Ruth and kind of conclude our series with these thoughts. Ruth led a very different life than the life that you teenagers watching would lead today. She lived in a different time, and a time that was specifically very difficult for women. Without being married, young women couldn't go to school, they couldn't work, couldn't own property. But Ruth doesn't get caught up in her negative circumstances. She doesn't get caught up in the difficult things of her life. Rather, she's strong and she's resilient, and she jumps to work. She looks for a way to provide, and her and her mother come up with albeit a sneaky way, but she proposes to the man that she wants to be with. The characters in the story, a few times they reference God, whether he's ignoring them or how they're blessed by him. But the reality is, God is barely mentioned in the story. We know in chapter 1, it's mentioned that he provided food for those back in Israel. But it very often doesn't mention God directly doing something in the story. But when we read the story, we can't help but notice that God is at work in redeeming Ruth, but also providing a path to bringing us Jesus Christ, the reason that we're all here today, and the one who brings us all hope. Hopefully you've learned a lot from this book, and I'll leave you with this thought. God has promised that those who go looking for him will find him, and you can find that in many spots in the Bible. Many days it's hard to believe or notice where God is. Sometimes we think he's abandoned us, sometimes we think he doesn't care, sometimes we just think, God, what's the point? But I want us to look at the story of Ruth as a reminder that we need to continue to look for God, even when it seems like he's not mentioned, even when we're not sure if he's there, even when sometimes we feel as though he's turned his back on us. We see in the story of Ruth that God is working, God is active, and God is preparing a path for us to find our way to him and to the things he has for us. I want you to take a few moments with your group to recap all the things you've learned, and just take some time to pray and think about all that God has done for us. Continue to look for him, and you will find him. Be blessed. Thanks for joining us for this series on Ruth.